Okay, since the last one, we ended up towards the more of the discovery of the program, right at the point of where I discovered that I belonged where I was. Before, all up until then, I felt like, the crime didn't match the punishment. That's how I was looking at it. Since then, the last visit, found a third opinion that decided to give us a shot and did 4 rounds of chemo, did some brain radiation for the tumors in the brain. I don't know if we knew that one when we recorded this. And just finishing up with that, I actually just finished up my fourth round. I guess it's been about a week ago, 8 days ago. I finally, I'm still underneath kind of residuals of that, but going into a scan next week, and that's going to kind of redetermine where I'm at. There's a lot of good signs showing a lot of promise. Just for the sake I'm still sitting here, is one of the biggest hurdles that we had to cross. But yeah, I'm here. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling a lot better physically than I was when I was sitting in this chair during the last interview. So, but still, I want to get out the rest of this story. Telling the first part of this story is really, it's kind of a morbid way of thinking, but it's kind of brought my life full circle. Everything which I said last time, I've never spoken these words before, and a lot of these things that are going to come out today, some of them have filtered through. Most of it, this is a story that's never been told, and I just feel like it needs to be, and just for my own sake, my own sanity, is something that I just need to release. A lot of these things have been able to carry me and get me as far as it has through life. Which is, with the trials and tribulations that my life has brought upon me, and being able to hold it together as well as I have, I guess you could say, But yeah, so I guess where we left off, I was getting drilled by, his name was Dave. I forgot his last name, but he's drilling me. He's like, basically, why are you there? Why are you there? Why are you there?
Dave was one of the counselors?
He was the head counselor. He would come over from the States every 2 months. I think he came over like 3-4 times a year to host. There's 2 different seminars. These are 3-day immersive, heavy therapeutic seminars. You don't have any, you're engulfed. Every step, every conversation, every exercise is planned and choreographed to get you to a final broken down stage. So for the first 2.5 days, is he's just taking turns breaking us all down. Some of us broke down through the horseshoe loop where you stand up, which I described a little bit, and he focuses in on the people that are breaking. You're going to break, and you're going to break in front of everybody. You're going to feel the embarrassment. You're going to tell the full truth of whatever it is, and you hear everything, from, just the worst things you can imagine, from molestation to drug use, devil worshiping, whatever it may be, that children have gone through. Like I said, we've all got a story, and I found mine. Mine was always a really, I always kind of, with feeling so alone, I always put myself that I was alone, and I almost had an obsession with dying, and I still kind of refer to it the same way, but I'm too cowardly to pull the D myself. But I longed for like this, companionship and stuff, and a lot of it came back to like I was looking for acceptance. I was looking for acceptance from my father. I was looking for acceptance from whoever, and through this discovery, you come down the final day. Uh, I guess it's the night before, because the next morning you kind of it kind of rebuilds you back a little bit, but you're in a closed, completely dark room. It's a lot there's music set to a lot of it, but it's a controlled meditation. It's like, you start out here, imagine yourself, you're in a field, and they take you deeper and deeper, and, you put your bully in front of you who caused all your problems, and, some of that's, in my case, it was some of my best friends at the time that were sitting in front of me, and you're allowed to release that anger. And we had like a rolled up towel that we had duct tape and stuff, and you just start beating the hell out of the ground. And there's a couple different therapists and people that it's usually level 3s and level 4s of the program. They've already been through all this, and they come around. They just help keep you on track, get deeper and deeper and deeper. And
So you're in a room by yourself?
You're in a room, you've got a space to yourself. It's completely black, but you can hear other kids and stuff like that, but you're so engulfed. If you're working the program, you're engulfed into your world.
So there's one person speaking, kind of doing a guided meditation, and everybody's kind of in their own space experiencing this.
And then you got some staff members coming around and just making sure that you're going into this, it's a trance. And it's very deep therapy, especially if you are to the point where you're face to face with that reality, that breaking moment. It's they get you almost back to a time when your life changed, that one moment, that one thing, whatever that may be, and who you blame it on, and everything, and ultimately, as you get through all this anger and everything, and you're left with your inner child. I mean, you're just broken. There's nothing left, and a lot of what you just realize is this is you just beat the hell out of yourself.
What was the point? Do you remember what the point was when you said they kind of break you down to that point when your life changed or that moment? Do you remember what that was for you?
I do. I do.
Okay. And then when you say you get broken down to your like inner child, like is that a position of clarity? Is that a position of like deep regret? Like what does that feel like?
That's before innocence was taken from you. Where true happiness lies, where true trust and love can preside. There's no more fear.
So it's taking you back to a good place.
To a good place.
Yeah.
It's you don't have any more demons to fight, and you know what that demon is.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it comes back to where it's almost like you're looking inside the mirror that we recreate that victimization every time we replay that inside our heads.
Mm-hmm.
If we were raped, we rape ourselves over and over and over again. If you're beat, if it was a family, member saying such and such, whatever it may be, whatever is that turning point, is we
re-victimize.
We re-victimize. Whereas the people that cause this, and I've said this before, and I believe this is, your bullies very seldomly even remember you. And they don't look at themselves that they even bullied you, that they even did anything at all. They hated you. Yeah, we were friends. But to me, I was beat up and humiliated over and over and over again. And then I've redone that how many thousands of times in my life. So kind of coming through this is when I realized that my depression was, that's where I realized that I had suffered my full life, has been in a depression state. And it's hindered me from relationships. It's hindered me, and it's taken control to where it's hindered me from relationships with inside my own family. Family had started growing apart and stuff like that. I went internal and locked down and stopped sharing my fears, my happiness, my good days and my bad days. I stopped sharing those.
Mm-hmm. And this stopped from that point you talked about when your life changed.
Well, I can remember a point that I allowed the depression get to a dangerous side, and that's something that happened with inside the family. And it was just, I was being an asshole way too much, and I was being way too rude to mom and dad and everything else. And just some words were said that should have never been said. Mm-hmm. On both parties.
Yeah.
And that's where it went like dangerous for me. That's where I went to fantasizing about suicide almost, or that not afraid to die at all, or welcome it, and a deep, deep, deep depression. The having a hard time to realize where I belong happened as far as I can remember. It's, I didn't look like my brothers. I didn't look like my dad. I didn't, I was introduced different. It was, I just carried that from birth, and then you add in just the adolescence of teenagers, and wanting to rebel a little bit, and you become a jerk or whatever else. It just compiles and compiles and compiles. And, everybody's got their story, it's even that, some of my kids have watched my first podcast and they're like, I never realized that, but I can relate. It's like, I've kind of said this since day one, is everybody has a story. Everybody has a reason to sit down and cry.
I don't want to veer you off track, but I'm curious to know, like, if you could go back, could something have been said differently if you'd have done something differently, or what, or the way someone responded to your actions differently? Could it have?
I think a big, what, like, the family could have done, I guess, a little bit different, and I could have maybe voiced my opinion a little bit different, but where I was in snow skiing at the age of 13, 14, 15, and where I was coming along on dirt bike riding, on my motorcycle skills and stuff like that, instead of sending me off to basketball camp or encouraging that portion of the Fielding family, is saying, he's got this love for skiing. Let's get him into some races. Instead of basketball camp, send me up to Oregon to these very expensive basketball camps. Send me to Chile. It's wintertime down there during the summertime. Let me go down there and meet with the ski coach for 3-4 weeks. Yeah. And do it that way instead of going off to basketball camp for a week, 2 weeks. Let me go off to ski camp, or let's let him ride. Let's get him some good gear, and let's get him against some riders that are better than him, to where he can learn properly. I was kind of being taught by just people who was crazy enough to twist the throttle. And yeah, I've been dangerous. My mom always said I was extreme and stuff like that, jumping off cliffs and everything, but I've always been very controlled. And what I've done is in a safe way. Have I jumped off at 30 and 40-foot cliffs? Yes. Probably do it before I'm dead. Again, I've got a couple things I want to do up skiing on my bucket list before I fully hang up my skis. My motorcycle, I'm waiting for some stuff to clear up in my gut, but there's a couple gaps and stuff like that that I want to do, and so yeah, but it's really easy to turn back and be like, you know what, if mom didn't get mad at me at that fight, or if dad would have spent money on me and got me that motorcycle then, or it's real easy to play that butterfly effect and everything would have been.
Yeah. Well, I ask because I think the natural question a lot of parents are going to ask is like, what's the best way to respond to kids? And
I've been asked that a lot, and I can say, and I just say, find out what they're passionate about. If that's art, if that's singing, if that's playing the piano, if that's jumping off a cliff, if that's finding themselves scaling up the side of Mount Everest, find out what intrigues them and dump gasoline on, feed it to them, morning, noon, and night.
Yeah.
Because it's just, they're going to do what they're going to want to do anyway. Would you have them rather share that portion of their life with you or hide it from you?
Yeah. All right. Well, I didn't mean to get you off track. I just wanted to.
No.
There.
But,
so you're back in the therapy.
So I'm back in therapy, and, through this discovery is when it's an enlightening moment, because I feel like, when I walked out of there, I'm like, I felt like I've got clarity, but I'm also kind of depressed that I'm right where I need to be. And I didn't want to be there. It's still very, it was traumatic. I still have nightmares to this day about how I was kidnapped and just how your rights are taken away and stuff. They call it institutionalized, for people in prison and stuff. But there's still a nightmare that takes place that relives, that moment. And
so when you were doing this exercise, you were still in Samoa? So this wasn't after you came home. This was
in the program. In the program.
I've
been there for about.
So there's no parents there.
6 days. No,
it's just counselors, kids that are level 3 and 4.
Yeah, and a main therapist that this is what he does.
Okay.
And so I go through the discovery, and then I kind of just hit a stagnant point in there, and I think just the depression of kind of being there, not. You gotta understand, I still haven't been able to talk to anybody to find out what happened.
Mm-hmm.
When
Dave was asking you, why are you here? Was he trying to get you to acknowledge? Or was it like...
He was wanting me to break.
Or just get you to think about it? Or
yeah, just like, why are you here?
And you were still kind of confused.
Yeah, I was into drug use, and I was into this, and I was into that. Well, why'd you use drugs? Well, I enjoyed them, and friends, and this, and that. And then it was... because I didn't like life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got tired. I didn't like going to school anymore. I was afraid to go to school. I gave in to my bullies.
And going through this discovery, is that at a certain point in your progression in the program? Like, do you have to get to a certain level before you do this? Or was this like a couple weeks?
This is mandatory. Everybody goes through this. This is part of going through the program.
So how long had you been there before you started?
I'd been there for probably about 30 days.
Okay.
So I'm still a greenhorn in many ways. So went through that. I was up on level 2. I made, I did that in record time. So I was, kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to sail off to level 3, level 4, be done in no time. That didn't happen. And I think they kind of just did that on purpose. But it went stagnant, actually got put on probation, and then actually dropped back down to level 1. At which time it was...
What did they drop you back for?
Just not progressing.
Mm-hmm.
You hit a certain point, and it's like we're only allotted certain times throughout the day to talk to one another. I mean, it was completely silence, and we're writing and journaling, and so to get recognized, you gotta speak, and you gotta speak quickly, and you gotta do it regularly, so they see you. But There was just one day, we went through focus. We came in, and I'd been struggling. We started the focus seminar, and it kind of picks up where Discovery left off. But it's not hunky dory. It goes more into your issues and everything, but it's also where you're focusing in on you, like what type of person I am. Some people are big and strong and protectors, and other ones are, more, you know, of a nurturer and gatherer kind of thing, and the other one's a hunter and fierce warrior or whatever.
And they gave you these kind of categories.
Well, no, it's just as you start to realize who you are, being immense, constantly being pointed out like your fears. If public speaking is your fear, they're going to point it out every single day. If acceptance is your fear, they're going to make you strive for it every single day. It's just they know all your issues, so you've got to be working on them. And through focus is where you start developing what is called an inner dialogue, by that time you gain the tools to be able to create honesty with inside yourself. So, when you're sitting there drunk or you're sitting there high or whatever else, there's a little voice in the back of your head, even the strongest addicts have them, that what you're doing is wrong. You make a choice every single day to get up and not listen to your inner dialogue. And in focus, you learn how to tune into that inner dialogue, that inner child, that is what you're doing right. Is it morally right? Is it serving you? Is it serving others? What's the purpose of what you're doing? Is what you're doing for the purpose of sheer acceptance of a boss, friend, spouse, whatever it may be, complete strangers? And we live our life every single day to this inner dialogue. And people get so engulfed with the status of that. And Americans, we bask in it. And it comes down to the clothes that we're wearing, the hairstyles, the piercings, the tattoos, the job, the cars. It's all part of a social acceptance. If we were to get knocked back into the Stone Age, we lose power, we lose electromagnetic field to where electronics no longer work and stuff like that. Popularity is going to be a completely different thing. It's going to go to the hunter and gatherers, But this inner dialogue, this inner contract, that's where I feel like everybody needs to be kidnapped and go to therapy, is to learn their inner dialogue, what their inner happiness is, what creates their inner happiness. And that's by living by a contract. My contract is I'm a loving, caring, trusting, determined young man. Take out young, but that means just each one of those words. I love deeply. I care about the things that I care about. I'm trustworthy. When I get focused in on something, I'm determined.
Now, are these attributes that you determine? Hey, these are what are important to me. It kind of becomes your kind of like your mission statement, or
it's my contract that I wrote to myself, and I discovered these words through, it's another kind of immersive kind of dialogue thing. It's what are the words that are coming out by, or what are you, and determination came out, trustworthy came out, and I care, and I care deeply and stuff, and I don't remember quite what everybody's, some other people had some very unique contracts and stuff like that, and a lot of them, it's kind of like they almost, it's almost the polar opposite of what issues you are coming in. You know, that
it's kind of like setting
by
a target.
living my contract, it doesn't allow me time to give two craps about anybody else. I have to walk my path.
Yeah.
You know,
it's kind of like setting a target for yourself.
Yeah, and it's these tools that I learned that it really kind of kept me alive through all this. And like coming out, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but yeah, coming out of focus. Now that I had my contract and stuff like that, I think it's like my first. I just got angry one night, and the level 3s and 4s went off beach, and that's when they get to call home. They get to eat at like a restaurant, and they get to wear normal clothes and stuff like that. And I just been there, felt like so long. And I remember I just gave some bogus feedback. It was my turn to speak at night, and I just went around and like gave the leader, because there's always a leader of the group. And
is the leader a participant?
Yeah, he's a fellow, kid.
Yeah.
But it's usually one of the higher levels, usually a level 3. By level 4, you become more like staff. They're usually a level 3 and, a little bit farther along in all their therapy and stuff like that. But I came up and I just gave like all the level 3s in the family. That's what we called our groups, was families. Like just direct feedback. Like one kid, he had creative inside his contract. And I was like, and I haven't seen you be creative for weeks. Every night meeting used to have this and that and different games and stuff. Where's this? And I went to all of them and broke them down. Like, you're not living to your contract. Don't judge me on mine. And that was just a flip. They instantly turned around. They gave me a recognition. And like within 2 to 3 weeks, I was moved up to level 3. It was that quick, which was in record time. I'd been there for 7 months at that time. And I think the fastest was like 8.5. So I got level 3, and the day I got level 3, they took us off beach, and I knew I get to call home. It's the first time I get to speak to somebody. It was a Sunday. I didn't know how many hours difference. I knew it was like 8 to 12 hours difference in between here and Utah or Samoan, but with it being Sunday, I didn't know. We were calling. I want to say it was almost like late at night. So it was like mid-morning or something. I was afraid that everybody's going to be at church. Really, 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 really nervous. Because in a lot of ways I was angry. There was a lot of parts of me that wanted to ask the why. Still very much angry, still very much having the nightmares. I'm just kind of reliving it. And I remember, you get on and it's an international operator, and you finally get the country code, and phone started ringing, and it rang, and it rang, and it rang, and it rang, and it rang. I was getting ready to hang up, and the dad answered. All I could get out was, "I did it." And we just both started crying. And they only give you 15 minutes for your first phone call, 10 minutes. Phone calls after that. And we had been sitting there for probably like 5 minutes. They just kept on going, "You did it. I'm so proud of you. Even if you did it, I'm so proud of you. Mom jumped on the phone. Come to find out, Dad left. He felt like he had to leave priesthood meeting. But he left early. And word made it back to Mom and Relief Society, and she came home to check on him, make sure he's okay. And there's a part of me that just, he was just always so in tune. That I knew that wasn't the time to question any of it. Mom, of course, gets on, and all her letters were, it's just about business. What's the family doing? What's the weather like? What's the food like? And stuff. And so we made it through that phone call. And like a week later, for some reason, I got to go on off grounds again. And I got to make another phone call home, and this one we got to be a little bit more serious. I knew I was coming up. It was January, February. Technically, they can only hold me there till my birthday in April. What's going on? I'm down to weeks. And Mom and Dad said, and it was mostly Mom, but Mom's like, we want you to stick out the program and wait until you get recommended home. And nobody's been able to do that in under 13, 14, 15 months, something like that. And they were like, there's a parent conference, and they like to bring the kids home around these conferences. And they're like, there's one in, it's like September or October, like 6-7 months out. They're like, I'd like you to go to that one. I'm just like, are you kidding me? And I remember just getting upset, and I was like, we haven't even talked about how I even got here. And you guys are just wanting me to just say to hell with it for 6 months, past my 18th birthday. We haven't even had a conversation yet. I think my counselor picked up on it because he kind of ended the phone call right off. But I was really upset. And I went in, David come back by this time. This is mid-February, end of February, or mid-March. And he wanted me to be the lead counselor going into the focus portion of the 2 seminars, which is kind of an honor role. And I hadn't really even participated in the staff side of these yet. But he asked, he wanted me to be the head counselor in the one in the focus. Worked with him hand in hand, side by side through these focused in trainings, dealt with kids. I helped out on the discovery seminar for the 3 days and helps a lot of kids get into that, find their inner child. But the focus is where you're helping them find exactly what type of child they are. So there's a responsibility there. And it's just what I needed, I guess. After that, Sonia had come, and she was a counselor as well, and she had helped assist. But at this time, they were trying to get more direct counseling involved and get a little bit more Americanized because our diets, our medical needs weren't being met. It was straight up child abuse what was going on up until this point. So they had been spending more time over there helping to train basically therapists, which thank God, it allowed to where we could communicate through letters about every 2 to 3 weeks instead of about every 2 months. But I got done with the focus.
So was it all just kind of run by local people, and they
The
were
local staff,
food wasn't sufficient? And
Brian Farfanua, he was Samoan, but he had obtained all his uh, education and stuff like that. He actually had a degree in psychology and stuff like that, and he was over there pretty much full time. His daughter's actually on the newscast up here on Fox 13, set by Fanua. But I met her when she was just a little kid. But
it's crazy though, they didn't have sufficient food or medical.
Yeah, all we had was amoxicillin. Medical, they just, like, my wisdom teeth came in during this time. Is right. I was on level 3, and I remember I was so sick that I was worried that I wasn't going to be there to be recognized and stuff like that. And I was working towards level 4, and my wisdom teeth were coming in, and it was so bad, and I had lockjaw that I took a knife and a fork, and I was digging at my gums just to get them to bleed so I could get a little bit of relief. That's how bad it got. They took me into a dentist, but no. No. And Dad knew that. Dad knew, what was going on and stuff. But things started getting better. But I helped out with that focus, and I remember it was really late at night when we finished up and stuff, and all the kids got to bed, and I remember just sitting out there on the beach, and I was praying, and I was just kind of still upset. And I had decided that I was going to stay. I wanted to come home on a recommendation. I felt like that I owed myself that, and I also knew kind of like this was a major, big financial burden and strain upon my family and everything else that I need to take this. I need to maximize my time here. And so I told Sonia and Dave. I took them to the airport like a couple days later and stuff, and I remember we're riding to the airport, and I told Sonia, I was like, she's like, you got a birthday coming up, and I was like, yeah. She's like, well, what you gonna do? And I think she had been talking to Mom and Dad to, it's coming up to my time, so. She goes, if you decide what you want to do, and I said, yeah, I've decided to stay and be recommended home, whatever that may take. I'm still on level 3 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You still got to get to level 4, and then you got to be on level 4 for some time. There's a lot to learn on level 4. And so 2 weeks later is right at the end of March, maybe the first part of April, and Brent Facer showed up. Now, he was the one that owned the program. He owned the whole damn thing. And like when these people came around, like when Brian Farfanua came in, when Sony came in, when Dave came in, these were powerful people. They could move you up and down that quick. Just by, you look at them wrong, they'll drop you. I mean, it's like they can read your mind. And they can find out who's working the program and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
So when Brent Facer shows up, no, Brent Facer doesn't show up. And he came down to Single Lily, and I was working in the schoolhouse and stuff like that, and he came in and he's like, "Yeah, I heard is there a Matt Fielding in here?" I was, "Well, yeah. Hey, I'm Brent Facer." I'm like, "Yeah, I've heard a lot about you or whatever." Guy takes me to lunch, pulls me off, drives off. He's like, "Yeah, I came over here to meet you." What are you talking about? But why? And he goes, "Well, I've heard that you got a recommendation." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, you're getting recommended to go home, and I wanted to meet the new record holder."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Well, I'm going to go home on a program, and that's not till October." He goes, "No, there's one in the end of May that they didn't tell me about." And he goes, "We're going to send you home on that one." But he goes, "You got recommendations from both therapists and Brian Farfanu." And he goes, "This is the full cross panel board." And he goes, "You've only been here for 10 months." And he goes, "I wanted to meet you." So here I am.
Yeah.
Took me out to lunch, and he allowed me to call home, talk to mom and dad for as long as I wanted. And they said, they're like, "Yeah, we're going to bring you home on the 28th. And it was just like, I was moved up that day. Brian came down and was like, "Matt, level 4." I instantly untucked my tank top. At which time I get to get my tub, the infamous tub. So that was kind of an intense week, Brian. Everything really kind of hit home on that, and I felt good. But I almost look back now, and I think I should have maybe stayed till the October. But
Why is that? You think you would have grown more, or is it
I think so. The self discipline, learning my own chosen patience instead of being patient because I have to. I'm patient because I choose to. I I learned that later on in life. I felt like that could have been beneficial more towards my early 20s. Setting, just being able to have a little bit more self discipline. But who knows? Like, it's the butterfly effect. It's you can never tell. I was also just ready to get home. I'd still been the PTSD of this all was just still unbearable, and I was wanting to go home and see if it could just disappear.
before you went home and through going through this program, did you at any point go, okay, because of what I've learned, because of these skills, because of these techniques, I understand why I'm here? And did you have any sort of like resolution to that? Or did you still feel kind of like, okay, I jumped through the hoops and now they're sending me home, but I'm still like, what the freak? Why did I have to go through this?
Well, yes and no. There was a sense of embarrassment, like coming back. I had a friend, Paul Kerr, and he had went through something. He came home when I was gone, but he went over and picked pineapples in Hawaii. And I remember he got just a lot of smack, pineapple picker Paul, and
Yeah.
kids are just jerks,
Yeah.
and plus it's like, oh, you're in a rehab, or you're, and discussing some of my issues, down to potentially suicidal, manic depression, and to discuss a lot of these issues, it's especially in a room full of other addicts and people with issues and stuff. I come from a loving family that has a mother and a father. They eat dinner together at night. We have holidays together. We've got brothers and sisters that look out for each other. My issues don't count. They don't warrant street credit or any of it,
Mhm.
You can't claim hard times. And that's kind of how a lot of it went when I came home. When I was leaving there, it kind of felt like I discovered all this about myself, and yeah, it's kind of like healed. Now we had learned and put together, kind of mission plans and stuff. A plan of attack. Like once you get home, that you're just not going to go out and date. You're not just going to go out and do this. You're going to go home. You're going to keep a schedule. You're going to keep doing your therapy. You're going to do your journal entries. You're going to go to AA meetings. You're going to do chores. You're going to do daily exercises and kind of keep on a regimen. And because it's a real slippery slope when you get home. But that all goes out the window when you get home.
Yeah, some of these tools sound really valuable as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, wow, this would be. But when you're a kid, it's like you don't have all the life experience. Some of that stuff is hard to really recognize the value, I would think. I mean, some of the things you're telling me is like, wow, that sounds like really valuable. But how much a 18-year-old kid really latches on and really fully understands how to implement may be different.
And that, and when you're faced with a relationship of love or something like that, it's like until you get your heart broken a couple times, you don't quite know what that is.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of trials and tribulations, and I just had a whole slew of them still to go. So when I came home, I was counting down the days, which was like the longest month of my life. And I actually, like the last couple of weeks I was there, I kind of asked to not come home. I asked if I could come home and just kind of make amends, like come home for like 2 weeks, make amends, see some family members and stuff like that. But then I wanted to go back and just kind of like live at the program. I wanted to go work there. And that's one of the side effects for everybody that goes through kind of like an intense therapy is, you just want to stay there.
Right.
And I imagine people that spend 30 years in prison, after a while, it's just like, I'd just much rather stay here than, same kind of thing. And because it's like you get to know that and you know what it takes. And out here in this big old world, it's
a lot more moving parts.
Not everything's so black and white and working and non-working. So counting down those days and everything and leading up to it and stuff and just saying my goodbyes. Oh, getting my tub. I was really excited about that. Up until then, it was just the only tank tops I had was other level 4s that were leaving, just giving off stuff that they aren't taking it home with them and stuff. And it came time for me to go up and get my tub out of the house, out of the storage. And come to find out, there was a handful of tubs that were broken into and stolen. Of course, mine was one of them.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't have anything. None of my clothes, none of my sandals, none of.
Like someone from the program or broke it, or like a counselor, or like one of the kids snuck in there?
A Samoan, somebody from the island. Because these houses aren't like locked up or anything. But
yeah.
The excuse they gave me, and they're like, well, here on the island, it's like everybody just kind of like shares everything.
Yeah, I'd like them to share it back.
And I'm like, well, I know there's a pair of TVs in there, and I know they were going for like $100. And that was back then, And I had a pair of Nikes, all this underwater like camera stuff and stuff like that to, I'm on a tropical island. They sent me with all sorts of cool stuff and all gone. And all my clothes. No tank tops, no clean shirts. I was still just these prison issued stuff. So, I was really stoked to get out there, and I went up there with like all the other level 4s that moved up. I think there's like 8 of us. And everybody had their boxes, and some had like candy and stuff like that, and photo albums and stuff. And mine had all this stuff in it, but Mine
Oh
was
God.
gone. So I just got to sit there while everybody kind of opened up their Christmas morning.
Yeah.
And I even, kind of like on the phone call home, I mentioned that, I didn't get any of my stuff. And Mom even mentioned, like, well, should we try and throw something together and send it over there? So, oh no, it's going to be coming home about that time. So
Yeah.
that was kind of like just a real kick to the teeth, especially that how much success I was starting to feel with inside the program and stuff. I really wanted to. I was looking forward to having nice, clean clothes to come home with, like nice, comfortable sandals, and just being clean. I wanted to get a nice, clean haircut, and none of that was coming together. Just nothing was coming together. It should have set up some red flags, but. Then coming home, there was a group of us that came home together, and for some reason, everybody inside my group decided to smoke and drink on the way home because we didn't have staff. They flew us from Western Samoa on the little Reconink airplane over to American Samoa. We had a 10-hour layover before our big plane got there, but we were officially out of the program at that point, so they handed us whatever money we had left from the program, which, I think I had, like $60 or something. And they said, see ya. So we're just there walking the streets of American Samoa, and we knew our flight came in at 10 o'clock at night or whatever. And I went off and I was souvenir shopping, because all my brothers and stuff like that, when they come home from missions, they always brought like stuff home. And I didn't have any of that type of stuff. I never was given an opportunity to do anything like that. So I was going around trying to find various things that I could bring home that represented, what I had just been through a little bit. Found a few things and stuff, but started congregating back, and for some reason I was alone all day. I don't know why, but we started, showing back up at the airport and stuff, and a lot of the guys went to the movies and stuff, and like everybody was trashed and smoking. I was like, what are you guys doing? I mean, it's been like 4 hours.
Yeah.
You could make it 4 hours, and I look back at this time, and this was like one of my stronger moments, but it was also just a really hard time. And, I was coming home with some really close, Justin Reynolds, Ryan Arnold, some guys that I'd become really close to. And I turned to all of them and I was like, I can't associate with any of you for the remainder of this flight, through this trip. I'm sorry, and it just sucked, but I also felt like, what was I doing wrong? Why would, maybe I should have been doing,
Yeah.
but, so it's just that whole coming home was kind of like the tripping and stumbling coming home, and it just kind of led straight into my 20s, which was a lot more than that, that's when, me and Cassie we got together days after I got home. We met, twins were born, roughly a year later, year and a half later. I lost that relationship and, back into another relationship almost immediately. Was in that one for 6 years, 7 years, and lost that one. And in the meantime, it's just like kind of one trial after another. Addiction had stepped back in. Um, Alcoholism had been full force. I started smoking relatively quickly after getting back from Samoa. My brother Keith went into rehab at that same time And I think that messed with me. But getting back to, like when I came home, we went to this program with mom and dad.
This was that program in May.
Yeah. And like I landed like 2 days before it, and then we went to this program, and I had already started just like second guessing like everything, like what do I do? And
Like second guessing the training you had, or
friendships and stuff, plan of attack, who, you know, because as soon as like my friends knew that I was home, they started coming to the front yard, and and they were
bringing that old life back.
Yeah, the same lives that I kind of left, and they brought up that time, to kind of like it's my time to be mad at mom and dad and express my grievances, and I don't know if I should have. Looking back, I probably should have therapeutic wise. Um, but by this time, I had learned, like that what Dad went through when he, I learned kind of the other side of what had happened.
Yeah.
With me getting and I was also just wanting to be.
Did you learn that through a conversation with mom and dad, or was that through the seminar that you did?
No, I think it was coming back and more talking with. I think mom had mentioned it.
Was there ever a time where you guys?
I think Eric wrote me a letter from the missionary field that kind of went into detail about that night, because he was right there, and and I just, I felt like I'd caused enough pain that any more pain is kind of selfish, and so I decided to keep carrying that with me. And like I said just a few minutes ago, even like when I was out there running the streets there for a while, and doing heavy drug use and stuff, it's like my issues didn't warrant any type of street cred. I come from a loving family. My issues weren't real. There's a lot of kind of the way I played it off at that point, and for a long time after that, it just there's no reason to feel that way, because I guess it's not true, And
you're recognizing this now as later as an adult.
Even back then, I knew, I knew how to self-evaluate. I knew that the PTSD, that alone is causing issues.
Yeah.
But that PTSD, I'm not going to turn around and blame mom and dad and do the whole, it's kind of what you have to do to get it off your chest. You need to get into that vulnerable state and do your blame game and get it off your chest, and then you can turn around and realize that it's just a burden that you've been carrying, and now hopefully it's processed and you can go throughout life and you don't have to necessarily carry that burden anymore.
Do you feel like you've processed that?
A lot of it, just like even through this last, like that first recording, kind of telling this story, and I've talked about this like with Brittany and stuff, just, through this diagnosis and everything. And I do feel like my life has come full circle. That in ways, like I'm supposed to die now, so your life flashes before your eyes. I feel like it's done that kind of thing. And that's where it's kind of leading into another PTSD. Is this whole thing has been, it's taken up all my therapy training to deal with what's going on. Um, to be terminally, to have a doctor, to have two different facilities strictly just sit you down and say there's nothing we can do. Let's just make you comfortable. Um, to see the pain. Let's not talk about my fear for a second. To see that pain, what it does to your spouse, to your kids. As a father, you are a protector, and you carry the burden. That's our responsibility as men, and to look over and to see your siblings and your kids and your wife, the fear that's being created, and that is because of you. That there's a lot of PTSD that's gone on with that. That's a lot of emotion to carry, and then to possibly be given a second chance. Good news, right? That's a whole nother issue of PTSD that's lining up. There's guilt associated with it. There's fear. I was a few weeks ago. I was having a really rough time, just kind of dealing with all this, and tears were just streaming down my face, and Brittany was just kind of just sitting there, just brushing my back. But I turned her and I go, I wonder how many buckets of tears I've filled up without missing a beat. She goes, how many do you think other people have filled up for you? Ever since that moment, I've never felt alone. And that's one thing I've felt my whole life is alone. Did I need to? No. But that was my burden that I was put that I've carried. That's my shield of honor. That's what's gonna be on mine when I fall. And I'm grateful for the challenges that have come forth in my life. I feel terrible for the people that have been directly affected in harmful ways. But I am proud of the trials and tribulations that I've been able to go through. I am grateful for this diagnosis. No matter how that's strange that sounds, but it's brought me closer to my family and my spouse, my kids, and to myself than I could ever possibly ever hope for in a lifetime. I don't know what tomorrow brings. I hope that it's a second chance that I can spend it's like I see my relationships in a different eyes now. They're just different, the relationship with my wife's different than the relationship with my siblings, my brothers and my sisters, and it's like, man, I want to kick it. I want to spend some time, and let them know how much they mean to me. That I hope through all this that even if just one of us, just to realize that it's like we don't walk this world alone, ever, 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 and there's nothing, at least with me, that somebody should be so embarrassed that they can't talk about. It's I've spent a lifetime dealing with pain, and a lot of mythology says cancer is exactly that. It's pinned up pain and undealt with stress. And through my chemo and stuff like that, it's taken me into some really dark places, just inside my own head, my facing my own demons. And the biggest thing I've felt through this is sorrow, loneliness, and sorrow. And that's a combination of what I felt my entire life. And that's why, like through the first one, and just kind of what's happened through this diagnosis and everything, it's that portion of my life is that portion of my life is dead. I will never be that person again.
Mm-hmm.
And who is this new person? Is there a new person? I don't know. It's not going to take me out today. Cancer's not going to take me out today. I don't know if a drive across town might, but just dealing with some of my kids and stuff like that, and I'm seeing the pain, I'm seeing the frustration and everything, and if it's one thing that I hope that they can take away from all this is they've got a pal in me to help carry that burden, no matter what it is, any given time. And they've got family as well that would do the same damn thing. Don't carry some of this stuff by yourself.
Yeah.
If you're angry with something, if you're angry, express that and figure out why. I carried anger for so long. If you're not feeling adequate, express that and find out why. What will make you feel adequate? And if it's going to come down to the emblem on your shoes or the tag on your shirt, yeah, we got some talking to do.
Well, you went through this experience that was not only profound and in so many ways, but you know, at whatever level you felt like it was effective, there were people there that were quote unquote professionals or trying to guide you through a process. I wonder, just when you talked about focus, and about having a contract with yourself or developing a narrative of who you are, going through this experience now with your diagnosis, has that changed the narrative for yourself? Is your contract adjusted somewhat?
I feel like I've been washed clean through this. I feel like my contract hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it's through all this is solidified. That even if I die tomorrow, I will not break contract. The devil's not going to win. And that's what all this has been about. since day one. It's been my devil, my demon, that has tried to tear me down, make me feel inadequate, keep me from living better, keep me from being the better father, being the better friend, being the better person. Just, that's what Satan does.
Yeah.
Is he exploits us.
And how do people let go of that? Because, like you went through an experience where people were doing a guided meditation to kind of helping you figure it out. But if it's anyone listening to this who's sitting at home or in their car and they're like, yeah, I'm mad. Does that mean I like let loose on whoever I think's my bully? Or is it, how do I develop a contract? How do I change the narrative and my story for myself? Because just like you said, you realized I had no reason to be upset or deal with it as I came from a loving family. I didn't have an excuse, but yet I created my own.
You carry one.
I created my own story that created my own problems, and I think all of us struggle with that. We all create our own. We're dealing with what we think is real, but maybe it's just made up. What advice would you get for someone to kind of break that?
Like a rotten coworker or something like that, quote unquote bully. It's not easy for anybody, but take a look at a true professional. Michael Jordan, or to take somebody right now that's really been impressive, but Caitlin Clark, the WNBA, she's with the European League now, but
yeah,
haters just all up in her face.
Yeah,
blatant fouls. People going on TV just talking trash. She's racist. She's this and that, doing everything to get you to flip, to get her to flip.
Yeah.
Be that professional.
Yeah.
Turn around and give them love. That, and that's something anybody can practice at any given time. You're never going to be master at it, but it's.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that struggle with, they don't feel like they're enough or they're good enough. And like when you shared that experience where you felt when Brittany said, well, how many buckets of other people cried for you? Feeling like, okay, I'm finally not feeling alone and letting go of that.
Not everybody has people.
Yeah.
There's more than one answer to life.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, I think if anything, you just raised some really important things for people to think about. Like, are the struggles we're going through, or have I created those myself? Are they real? Or is it something I've projected onto myself? Or is it something I'm just not letting go of?
And how much, like these bullies that are bullying you, how much are they? I would always beat myself up 10 times worse than any of my bullies did.
Yeah.
What killed me is I gave in to my bullies. There for a while, I picked on my little brother, Jason, for a while. And I told him this not too long ago, but one thing I really admire about him is he never succumbed to my bullying.
Yeah.
He never gave up. He never gave me that $5. He never surrendered. He may have been in the fetal position, hiding in the closet, whatever else, but he never surrendered. And I did. I surrendered to I believe them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what almost killed me.
That's like when the poison runs through you, is when you agree.
That's when I agreed with him. And that's when it turned around and be like, I'm not good enough.
When you start thinking, maybe I'm not good enough.
I'm not going to walk down this hall.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into that class anymore. I'm not going to try out for the play or basketball or football or track or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I'm going to quit debate because they made fun of me.
Yeah.
They call me a master debater.
Yeah.
Looking back, I should have taken pride in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just stepping back, that haters are going to hate. And A true champion knows that. If people are coming at you, if they're attacking you, it's usually because you're doing something right. And haters don't like that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think just not succumbing. I think that's some really good advice. I mean, you use Caitlin Clark. Maybe it feels a little easier to be professional when you can rain down deep threes on people all day long. But she put a lot of hours in the gym to get to that point.
that's just being confident with whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
If you're coming into your job and stuff like that, yes, you need to learn your things. You need to the people that are there before you, the ones that are more trained. But it's like when somebody comes into your house, show them what you got.
Yeah.
You can only give them your best, and your best is strictly that. It's not the best. It's just your best. And
Well, I think an interesting thing you brought up too was taking the time to consider your story on or your narrative on how you see yourself. Because I think sometimes we're in our own head, and so we don't even think about it. It's like a fish in water; they don't think they're in water. Sometimes we're in our own thoughts, and we don't even think about how we think about ourselves.
And we are our own worst critics.
Yeah, that alone, just getting someone to each of us starting to think about why we think that way about ourselves, or why.
And some people are the exact opposite. They're just, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best.
Yeah.
Well, then you need to start doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Start questioning yourself, what aren't you then? It's just about bringing balance. If you're feeling down, you need to be thinking the opposite, and if you're constantly just cocky and walking around, chances are you need to bring it down a little bit. And it's a constant adjustment. There is no right or wrong out there. There's working and non-working. There's stuff that works for you and stuff that doesn't. Throughout my life, it just seemed like a lot of stuff just didn't for whatever reason. And that was just my path. I'm supposed to be where I am today. We all are. We're a product of all our choices.
Yeah.
And my higher power and, my path has led me to here. Where is it going tomorrow? I'm not quite sure. But I know I'm done feeling what I've carried up till now.
And that feeling of coming full circle has got to feel like that closure. That's got to feel
free,
rewarding. Yeah, free. And that's all been part of your journey.
It's if I die tomorrow, I feel like I'm going to walk into cheers into my afterlife.
Yeah.
Glasses being raised high, the halls of Valhalla will sing. That's just how I feel.
Yeah. Because
I've also just been feeling pretty crummy by choice my entire life. But who says that's not the path that I'm supposed to take?
Yeah.
If everybody's got a path to walk, and everybody has their challenges. It's Christ died upon the cross for that. If you want to talk religion, it's why we're here upon this earth. We're supposed to go through trials and tribulations to know what it is to be human, to obtain a human body. We're supposed to feel these things.
Do you think accepting that reality, that just the struggle is just part of life, is part of being victorious?
I think finding happiness in the sense of the darkness this world has to offer. At any given time, you can turn around and become suicidal just by looking at the crap that's around us.
Yeah.
But you can also turn around and be like, wow, we live in just heaven.
Yeah.
Of just land of opportunities and endless just dreams, and it's all in the way we think.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much that simple. But it's the relationships and the stuff that we hold on to, and then it comes into what's right and what's wrong, and a lot of it was just taught to us. And then we put our own filters onto it. And next thing you know, we're not making it to the top of the mountain because we're chopping ourselves off by the ankles.
Yeah.
You know?
I sometimes wonder if life is a lot simpler, that there's a lot fewer truths than we think, and a lot of it is just stuff we've made up.
I
And if
truly believe that.
and if we can get down to the few things that are really true and just recognize what's we've just made up versus what's really real. But I think as a parent, we think, you're a father, I'm a father, and we think about what we can share with our kids to help them um, be successful in life and really live a life that feels like, man, that was worth it. And part of that maybe is some of the struggle, and just and understanding that the struggle is part of it. It's not that you're broken; it's part of it, and it's
the journey.
It's about the journey and overcoming, and yet I also sometimes look back to mom and dad and wonder, like going back in history is almost like going to another planet, right? Like back then, did they have these ideas and these concepts to really will it to try to articulate these kinds of things?
It's a lot of it. It's easy for us to go, oh, back then it was easier.
Yeah.
Marriages lasted forever because it was a different time.
Yeah.
And you ask mom and dad, I bet they don't agree with you. I bet raising up on a farm with little to nothing, going and putting yourself through college, buying a home, building a practice, raising a family, presents every just as much challenge back then as it does today. It takes somebody waking up in the morning and saying, I'm not going to listen to all the no's today. I'm only going to accept yeses. And it's only going to be on these issues because that's the only thing I care about. It's got to be those goals. Dad got up and he was like, I'm gonna go to school. I'm going to get A's. I'm going to become this.
Yeah.
And mom was I'm going to be a mother. I am going to raise a family with morals and ethics. And these are choices that just didn't happen just because we had a dinner table on a farm.
Yeah.
It happens because of them instilling their beliefs and their patterns onto us. The importance of religion and family and communication and the bonds. Because, you've been around this world long enough and seen outside of our family that our family is very unique. We have a very unique, tight family. We're not necessarily all talking 10 times a day and we know every little facet of each other's lives, but it's like, I know I can be just about anywhere inside the country and find somebody in my family and be like, hey, I need a couch.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to have a couch and probably a plate of food and, do you want to stay out and talk about it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot of family out there that's not like that. And
I think there are some differences. Like you mentioned, I hadn't really thought about it, but you mentioned, we grew up in a family where we had dinner every night. But, when we were kids growing up, you went out and played with your friends all day. And when it got dark, you just came home. There was no cell phones. There was no Life 360 app to track where your kids were. Yeah. Your kids just showed up when it got dark and you had dinner.
We were told, don't talk to strangers. Don't get into cars with strangers. And come home when the streetlights come on.
I think part of it is just real. I mean, I think back to some of the challenges I'm aware of that mom and dad went through. And I think there was a lot that were avoided because we did have dinner together as a family. And, just some basic things that are harder to do nowadays, it feels like, because there's so many distractions and
it's
so many
you're
things.
Seeing both parents having to work.
Yeah.
You're even seeing kids going out and having to work at a much younger age. A lot of these kids are going off to college level classes at the age of 16. Yeah, there's a lot of things that's different, and this world's become a lot smaller.
Yeah. For sure.
But it's still just taking on the challenges.
Yeah.
It comes back to
there's some basic fundamentals of
everybody, everybody can be like, yeah, I know what it's like not to feel like, I belong or I'm not good enough. I'm in, if it's sports or school or friendships or whatever else, it's like we all have our story. Mine, I was adopted and, I suffered from depression and then, codependency on several different, alcohol and substances and, battled that my entire life. Other people, it's, food obsession and weight gain and this. Other ones, it's abuse. Both they are either abusive or they like to be in abusive relationships. And it's like, I know intimately somebody in every one of these categories. And these are just challenges that we have to learn to overcome.
I guess I look at that and I look at what you've described through your experience and then taking another example like addiction to food or other things and the stories we create. Like, I mean, it feels like logically you should be able to just take yourself out of that path and put you in one correct path. And then a lot of that other stuff just kind of like, or distractions just kind of fly by and they don't really, they're not hitting you straight on,
Right.
But, and I guess that's where I get to like, what can we learn from your experience and what can we learn from all of our experiences? I think one of the things that's interesting about hearing your experience is it gives us a window into a whole set of life experiences that most of us have never had, right? And as you look at other people's experiences, and you see multiple windows into people's experiences, and then you look at your own experience. It helps you start to clarify and focus and go, oh, there's overlap, and other people struggle with these same things. And what's the clutter that I just need to cut out? Because
that's a lot of what it
and
is.
just get because again, as fathers, we want our kids to be able to not have to face the headwinds so much and just be able to capture those wins in their sails and really just propel them forward. And so yeah, I mean,
and some people just seems like they get it. That life they just get it and they just excel.
Well, I definitely think a part of life is
been that type.
I think definitely part of life is you're going to have challenges. It's part of the program.
And if not, man, you need to.
I look at some of the challenges I've had, and some that you described some of the challenges you've had, and those weren't maybe challenges that mom and dad had, but mom and dad had other challenges that were
suited for their life.
Yeah,
and the challenges that they
raising a big family, worrying about kids, business deals that went south. All kinds of things that I'm sure were stressful and frustrating.
They had stuff that kept them up all night, man.
Yeah.
Just like we do. But the thing is we just accept that they're there, and then, how much control do we actually have over it?
Yeah.
If there's something that we can do, should we? And a lot of it is just out of our control. So we have to learn how just to let that stuff go.
And that's probably key, is just being able to distinguish between what we can control.
I've kind of come into a saying over the last 15 years. It's like, if you can't hide it, flaunt it. It's like some people, they're very secretive, with addictions or with coping mechanisms. Everybody has coping mechanisms, how we deal with our stress, whatever that may be. And it's important that we recognize that they're there. Yeah. Not that we have them. Everybody needs that line of cocaine every once in a while. But it's, it's one thing to go out and party for a weekend and just kind of let your hair down. And it's another thing to try and get your kids ready for school and maintain a life underneath that lifestyle. And it's knowing when things start to take away, and that can be your job, that can be food, that can be alone time. Hey, I just need my alone time, going into my room or reading or whatever it may be. It's the time that's starting to take away from where your directions need to be. If that's towards your kids, or sometimes that's dealing with that uncomfortable issue, having that uncomfortable conversation. Maybe it's dealing with that job. Maybe it's just you're in the wrong job and you know it.
Yeah.
And it's taking the fear. It's having the courage to quit that job, figure out something else, and making that change in order to create that happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness, sometimes you do have to change things, Happiness is a state of mind, but it's also, if you're straight up being abused, there's toxic places.
Yeah.
And there's times where you just need to cut everything and trust yourself, trust your gut. And that's often hard to do, especially when you're constantly second guessing. We're always second guessing ourselves.
Yeah.
And
well, and I think that's that search for the right story or the right narrative. And again, I think it's hard to change the story about yourself when you've lived your whole life not even realizing you were living in your own story.
Yeah.
And then once you recognize that, it's changing habits and behaviors. And
it's asking yourself, are you truly happy?
And I always
is this making you happy? Be selfish with that answer. Because that could be a marriage, that could be fatherhood, that could be a job, that could be addiction, whatever it may be. Is this making you a happier person each time you're doing it?
Well, I had a mentor tell me once that, talking about your story, is this story serving you?
Yeah.
Because maybe your story's not even true.
Exactly. And the majority of what we're doing,
and it's not serving you. So if your story's not true and it's not serving you, why not make up a story?
Change the story instead of turning around and keep raping yourself.
Yeah.
With that story, because that's all we're doing when we relive, when we take that other beer, when we eat that other donut, when we withdraw ourselves or refuse that relationship. That's all we're doing is we are raping ourselves.
Yeah.
And
what's the story, I guess? Is that the connection walking back? And I'm asking sincerely because I think of, I think about eating that extra donut. Why am I eating that extra donut? What's that story? What's connected to that? That goes, I'm just.
What is it about it that's bringing you the comfort?
Yeah.
And is it actually creating the comfort for you?
And is it just for comfort? And why are you uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially when it comes into starting to get eating disorders, and often they'll go from overeating to anorexia or bulimic or something, because they'll go from one extreme to another. But yeah, it's the same way with alcoholism or being a workaholic. It's whenever something starts to get stressful, an issue that you don't want to deal with, and it could just be that you're in an unhappy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like coming home, so you stop by the deli and you pick up a sandwich, or you stay an extra 2 hours at work, or whatever it may be. You stop by the bar and get a pitcher of beer, stop by the lady's house, do whatever. And it's that narrative that you're avoiding.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to come back and you got to be focused. You got to be, what's not serving me?
Yeah.
And that's where you got to be honest. And it's hard to be honest with yourself, but that's when you can be the most honest, is directly with yourself. You know what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Like truly happy.
Well, I think there's a layer on top of that too, because I think eating certain foods, I've noticed, and I'm not a pinnacle of health by any means, but I've noticed, and this is why I wonder, why do I go back to that? Because I've noticed certain foods I eat affect my emotions, which I never used to notice, which I used to never be aware of.
You get off carbs and sugar.
Yeah. And those are the things that I noticed really trigger. And so then if you're not aware of your story and you're making decisions, maybe you're seeking comfort and you don't even realize you're seeking comfort because it's thought you have.
Strictly off emotions.
And then what you're eating, how that's muddling the receptors in your brain so there's a lot of things that
it's a cycle
we can control, but we may not be aware of that kind of compound on each other and build on each other. And
that can become overwhelming because it seems like everything in your life is now about this issue. The constant pattern of behavior is all wrapped up into one.
But things you're not even aware of impacting your life, and then we like to make sense of things. Why does this keep happening to me? I just must be stupid. I must be broken. I must not be good enough.
Okay, and that's where you got to stop.
And it's like a self-reinforcing.
And that's where you got to maybe start obtaining some help. Just going to a support group, a religious leader, going to PTSD meetings. Not everything's got to be an AA or an NA meeting, or just even chat rooms. There's chat rooms just, for whatever issue that you're kind of talking about or whatever. And if you're getting to the point to where it's just like, oh, I'm just dumb, or I'm lazy, or any of the, I call them self-limiting beliefs, where you start beating yourself up. That's the danger zone. And if you're constantly in that zone, that's where you may need to sit down and talk with somebody that's familiar a little bit with what's going on. And it's probably just going to come down with, no, you're just tired of dealing, constantly turning around and stumbling. It's like walking down a street. You walk down a street and you keep stepping into a pothole. You're just tired of stepping into a pothole. Well, what needs to happen is you need to start going down a different street.
Yeah.
Instead of going down that same street. So you need to kind of figure out what that street is. Not that just, oh, I'm in a pothole again.
Yeah.
Potholes often the result of something. You usually get high, or you're cramming your face with something, or you're working 20 hours of overtime a week is a product of something.
Mm-hmm.
So, it comes back, let's say it's an underlying addiction. You know that inside your head. It could be that you're unhappy in a marriage, and that could be that you're just not in love anymore. It could be that this person's not loving you back, marriage problems, whatever it may be. It could be bad friends, but it's just it's time to set back and figure out what that trigger is.
Well, talking about relationships, I feel like even a lot of those times it's incorrect stories maybe both partners are telling themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And none of it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Because and I think it's like anything. It's like sometimes after the fact, hindsight's 20/20, and that's the pain of this stuff. When you get tricked, and then you realize, man, maybe that wasn't even true. Maybe I played more into that. Maybe we both played into that because of our.
And now you're coming into any future relationships, you're going to be second guessing, and that's putting unnecessary burden on the future.
But if you're aware and you can kind of assess and catch yourself in those thoughts and go, man, maybe that's not true.
Yeah, you also need to pay attention to people. People will tell you the truth if you let them. They'll also lie to your face if you allow them.
Yeah.
And not saying it's always black and white and everything else, but it's.
Well, I read in a book something I thought was really powerful. Was like, why would we be surprised that people would lie to us when we even lie to ourselves?
Amen.
And so maybe just quit lying to yourself.
See, but what constitutes lying to yourself? It's
let me. This may not make
a lie is simply a filter of our own made up morals and beliefs that we send through our filter system. Who says what's?
Yeah.
What any of. we talked about it in therapy a lot was there is no good and bad. There's stuff that works for you. There's stuff that doesn't.
Let me run this by you. This doesn't have to be on the recording, but I'm just curious to get your take because we're into this now. Because I feel like there's natural laws that govern the universe, and I feel like those are the only things that are true. And when we learn what those things are true, and there's some characteristics about natural law, it has to be self-evident. It has to apply to everyone equally at all times and in all places. And so water, we know under the right conditions, freezes at 32 degrees. So when those conditions are met, everywhere on the planet, water will freeze at 32 degrees. Mm-hmm. We can predict that. We know the forces that cause airplanes to fly. And so we can make decisions and estimations and predictions based on the factors of flight. Mm-hmm. We know the chemicals that affect the heart to be able to do heart surgery, to be able to turn the heart off, do the surgery and turn it back on. Works every time. It's not like you get lucky once in a while or it doesn't work in England, but it works here.
Right.
And so I feel like those are the things that are true. And so if that's the case, if someone else can achieve something and become a great business person or a successful entrepreneur or have a successful marriage or has anything that you want to experience in your life, you should be able to experience the same things.
And that's where God is unique. And if that was the case, we'd all be on the same level spiritually.
But it's the stories we tell ourselves. Yeah. I could never be as good as that person.
But sometimes we got to go through these stories. Sometimes you got to go through the muck. Sometimes you got to go through the ridicule and be down to that cesspool to rise up out of the ashes and finally have the clarity he needed to find out the truth.
Yeah.
You know, it's in a lot of ways, like these truths you were talking about, yes, they are truth. I've got one, you know, I feel like the Ten Commandments can kind of just, or all religion can be compressed down to a couple. Basically, it's like, I feel like one of the biggest things, you know, that I've learned through religion is to love thy neighbor. You know, we should love and respect one another. Mm-hmm. And with that, we'll create a divine happiness and support for the countless amount of people and souls.
Well,
but you're gonna have demons walking among us. Yeah. And I do believe that they are here. In a lot of ways, I feel like we're living in purgatory. We're almost serving our penance now. Almost like heaven and hell is blended. You know, and they talk about there'll be a millennia in the final days that Christ won't even be upon this earth. It'll be just the demons. That'll just be the temptations. And if you look around, it's like, yeah, we're here. Yeah. I mean, you turn on anything Hollywood, and they aren't even hiding it. They've got the horns on. They've got the Monster energy drinks. There's like 6 pagan symbols right on the front. That's not an M. Those are the 3 spikes that hung Christ. Hmm. That's not an M. Hmm. You know?
But see, you brought up a good point, even like loving one another, because I feel like there's a natural law there. I used to think of that as like, well, that's how I need to behave towards other people. Like God's asking me to do that because that's how I should act and because that's how it's going to impact them. But there's a principle taught in Alma where he talks about the law of restoration. It says the way you treat others is how you're going to be treated. Mm-hmm. The way you judge others is the way you're going to be judged. Yeah. And so it's almost like he's telling us to love others because we do it to ourselves.
Do unto others as you want them to do unto you.
And he even says, the Savior even says in John, you know, judge not lest you be judged. That's not because so much how it's going to impact them, it's how it's going to directly impact us. Yeah. So do I want God to be understanding and forgiving of my faults and my weaknesses, or do I want him to pounce all over me like I am on this other person? And I think so that whole living in a way that what we want is being restored to us, that's a law. It changes the way you
see. But that's where we come down to, and Dad was really good with this, and I feel like I've become good with this, and several of my brothers and siblings are good at this, but don't cast judgment. Like, especially like, somebody comes to you and confides in you, and kind of like, we've had those friends and everybody that like they lay down some pretty heavy stuff, but they have that trust with you, and that they know they aren't going to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we want everywhere, right?
Well, that's what we'd want
ideally,
for ourselves.
That's what that's what we want. Now we know that that's not out there or whatever else, but we want people like that, especially when we're vulnerable, when we're wanting to turn around and be like, why I eat so much? You want to know why I drink so much? Fine, I'll tell you. When we hit that stage, you don't want to be judged. You don't need to be judged. You've already been judging yourself long enough, hence the addictions and everywhere else you've been thrashing yourself for a long time.
Do you think the principle of forgiveness, of being able to take that to the Savior, that he can take that burden from us?
Yeah. But it's, I think with that, it's kind of a double-ended coin there, because I feel like I've learned how to forgive others remarkably well, but then again, I didn't forgive myself my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I feel like I've sinned in that manner. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That I feel like,
and I think that's part of it.
And I think
we have to.
I think that's part of God's plan, and I think that's ultimately why I had to get diagnosed and stuff like that, is so I could finally right the errors of my ways, and see that, yeah, I can be non-judgmental and understanding and forgiveness to everybody. But I have never done it to myself, and now it's going to kill me because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the biggest, I'm here to obtain my spiritual body, or my physical body, and to hone my spiritual things, and whatever my God needs me to learn on this path, on this journey through this time on this earth, that there's been a set of challenges that have been laid out before me that I think I knew long before I ever got here. And I believe that we all are faced with that. That just comes from my own spiritual beliefs. But, I chose this path. Now with this, it's also, playing the big game is, we've got these demons and stuff out there to try to trip us up. I was given a loving family. I was given countless opportunities throughout my life. Down on paper, it's had a perfect life.
Mm-hmm.
You step back, and I carried a lot of pain and sorrow and just garbage. So you talk about the universal laws, it's down on paper. Should have been easy peasy. But because of God's plan and the temptations that are laid out, especially in these final days.
Yeah.
It's there. I don't know that God wants us all there. All the souls, because Satan's swooping up a handful too. And they're out there playing for keep, just like Christ is.
Oh,
they're both out there, and they got their scouts out there and everything else. And
something that keeps going through my head that you said, there's a scripture where the Savior says it's not what a man puts in his body that defiles him, it's what comes out.
mhm.
So you point to your substance abuse, or people can point to whatever their struggle might be, but he says it's not what we put in our body that defiles us, it's what comes out of our mouth. And those words, those stories, our thoughts are words, what we think about ourselves. Those thoughts and words did way more damage to you throughout your life than the physical drugs and alcohol
Sure.
of the moment.
Yes.
And that bad diet or that bad relationship, those thoughts that we carry in ourselves do way more damage in abuse.
It poisons, it kills families,
Yeah.
it kills the individual, it kills the soul.
The other thing that comes to mind is a talk given by Brigham Young, where he talked about in conference, when he talked about that sometimes we incorrectly attribute good and evil to God and to the devil, that we say, oh, the devil made me do that, or God made me do that. And he said, no, God gave you your agency, but he also gave you the ability to be a thing that acts, not a thing that's acted upon. That when we do good, that like that, we should give ourselves credit for that. And it's not always.
I think God puts challenges right in front of us. He wants us to be Michael Jordan. He wants us to get into some crazy situations and watch us pull out of it better than we ever even went into it. He loves seeing that.
Yeah.
And that's why, when I finally get up and get through the pearly gates, I'm not a God-fearing person. I'm more or less, I might square up to him and be like, really? I know you're a kidster, but dude, you took it pretty personal there for a minute. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's who my God is to me. He's like, dude, Matt, you want me to push you? Yeah, I played with you. You want to wear the big shoes, wear them.
Well, and it's always like you look at the things that you learned, it's hard to say what you went through wasn't worth it when you feel like you gained so much. And then there's some things that we go through where we just go, that wasn't worth it. But I look at some of the things you've shared and how much it seems like you've grown. I can't help but wonder if some of the PTSD and some of the burden that you've carried, it sounds like even until just recently, that maybe part of your healing process through this with cancer is being able to have a release of some of these emotions that have just had nowhere to go.
I think that's round 3 a few weeks ago. I think that's where round 2 and round 3 is where I really released a lot of there was a lot of darkness in my head. And I was living through, I've actually drawn some pictures and wrote some things in my journal about describing what I was feeling. And I described some of the sorrow and the loneliness that it's such a strong feeling. I refer to it as like when I found out Dad was going to pass. And there was such a dread of sadness that came over me. And I really, worried about Mom. I was like, Mom knew him long before any of us kids did.
Yeah.
And they, for us, it's like we belong to them. Those two chose each other.
Yeah.
So that's huge. And I remember just how sad I felt when we got the prognosis of Dad and everything. And I remember going through it, and I never felt sadness that deep. And when I was going through this sorrow, especially through round 3, it made what I felt going through with Dad, and I don't want to downsize it by any means, but it almost seemed like it was a trip to Disneyland. The darkness that I have been carrying it was my darkness. It was my demon. I've drawn a picture of him. Actually, a couple of them, but it is a sickness that I've carried, and I described it that it's nothing that like one life could. Losing my father, my best friend, the closest person to me, doesn't compare to the comparison. Like this feeling is over many of lifetimes, almost, that I've carried this darkness, this weight.
Do you think you're at a point where you let it go?
Yeah, I do believe that I've let it go, and not that you know habits die hard, but I truly believe, and it's just the way it's going to go. But if I have a day left, if I have a year left, if I've got another 40 years left, that person that I was before July 3rd, that person is dead. No, it's just not that I've changed or anything. It's just I'm not going to allow myself to feel that darkness and that burn and those demons to walk inside me again. Not that I'm not talking about sadness. I'm not talking about that. It's sorrow. There's loneliness and sorrow that I felt, which is some of when you go through a divorce and you start watching your kids grow up without you, that's sorrow. It's a sadness that builds. Um, when you don't, when you work hard and you set goals and you have the self discipline and just life doesn't work out, that's sorrow, and I've held on to so much of it that it's like my life, I would purposely kind of just like create nonstop scenarios to where I could collect more and more and more of it. And that's ultimately probably what I did. Because we create our own reality.
Like that hooking your attention on that brings more of that.
And
it's easy to say that, but it's difficult at times, even if you know that, to not do that.
And it's because it's so easy to, especially with me, it's just easy for me just to buck it up, put it on my back. Let's just go. Let's just get it done. Let's just muscles through it. And I've through all this, and especially just my physical demand, it's just like I'm stepping back from that. I can't lift anything heavy anymore.
Yeah.
I can't go out there and work in the heat, in the sun. Yeah. I can't carry guilt, shame, and sorrow on my shoulders anymore. There's no more for me to carry.
Yeah.
I carried it my whole life, and I've got 2 doctors that said I was dead. I don't have to carry that anymore.
I often think about, like, it's just an example of the program you went through. When I think about counselors or techniques or things that people do, I always wonder how effective it is, and it seems like sometimes there's just things you just can't teach. You just can't give someone the answer.
Right.
You just can't go, oh, look, you just do this drill. It's not
there's no right answer.
It's not like basketball where you can go, here's the drills you've learned for ball handling, just do them, I mean, you had some of those that aided you, but it's almost like you have to physically go through this experience to make the connections and the changes and the adaptations in your brain, because no one can just logically explain it to you. And you go, oh, okay, good. Now I got it locked in.
See, and I wish it was that way. When you get a DUI, when you get busted with narcotics, they make you, first time offense, they make you go through like drug court and rehab kind of thing. Or if you go through domestic violence, they make you take anger management classes. I think everybody should incorporate these type of classes into their regimen. Not for just a short period of time, pretty much on a regular basis. once a week. You're going off to a therapy class. You're going off to an anger management class, even though you're not angry.
Have you ever been to, the church has their
Their version of their 12 steps.
addiction recovery. Have you ever been to one of the churches?
I've used more of the churches. I've never been to an AA or an NA meeting. I quit alcohol using pretty much the 12 steps. I'm familiar with it.
Because I guess the difference is I guess it's exactly the same.
It's all pretty much.
But they bring Christ into it as far as like our faith in terms of.
Yeah, they go, well, they, like even with the 12 steps, the first step is getting it that you have a problem. The second step that there's something higher, greater than yourself.
Right.
And they do very much incorporate a higher being, because you do incorporate prayer, meditation,
right.
And a lot of it is like my life should have been perfect for the way my family dynamic was written out on paper. But because of a higher power, my life's not that. And it's because of something greater than myself. There's something greater than myself that's going on.
Well, that makes it sound like it's not necessarily God.
Well, it's just, a lot of it is just there's something bigger than ourselves going on.
I mean, we're playing in a bigger game than just ourselves.
Yeah. And
certainly we all grew up in ideal conditions, and ideally
we should all turn out the same.
But, well, not necessarily the same, but maybe avoided some of the challenges we've had. But that wasn't because of our circumstances. It wasn't because of what our parents tried to teach us. It's because of choices we each individually made. Which
it comes back to why Jesus Christ died on the cross, is so we have that power of choice. And see, there's our purpose here is to err as human.
Yeah.
We're supposed to mess up. We're supposed to feel fear and guilt and happiness and joy, and we're supposed to feel all of it.
There's another law, according to the scriptures, called the law of consecration, which means that all things are consecrated for our good. And the Lord says in Moses 139 that his goal is our eternal life and exaltation. And he gives us experiences, people, situations in our life that don't take away our agency, but take us through paths that teach us things that we need to learn. Because in the end, his goal is for us to make it back.
Sure.
And so sometimes we're like, why does this happen to me? But I mean, listening to your story, I wish you didn't have to go through some of the things that you had to go through. But when you talked about feeling like you came full circle, or feeling like you realized that you're not alone, like in my mind, just hearing that in the context of your whole story, it's like that victory moment. It's like when Rudy gets into the last of the game, and everybody, and he's getting carried off the field on his shoulders.
And it wouldn't have mattered if you don't go through all those different things.
But someone probably couldn't have sat you down when you were 14 and go, look, here's what you need to know. Right. Now you've got all the tools, and now you can just avoid all the headwinds and just sail off into the sunset.
In a way that they do. We tell our kids at a very young age, you can be whatever you want to be. Don't listen to anybody that says they can't. Be nice to others. Try your hardest. Work your hardest every single day, and you can become whatever you want to be. It's one of the truest statements out there.
Yeah. I guess it's just, it's some of those things you just can't be told. I guess you got to live it.
Well, there's another team playing out there.
Yeah.
And they don't.
But don't you feel like that in and of itself should give us a little more comfort to realize, like, hey, there is another team competing against you. And part of the journey is struggle. So, hey, you're right on track.
See, and that's where, and I'm starting to feel that now. And I believe people should. You should feel good when you come across struggles.
Yeah.
It's let you know that God's playing your piece. yeah, I just, anybody that's, listen to this, especially both parts, I know it's got a lot of long-winded, but, much of this story has never left my lips at all. A lot of these realizations have just come through uh, this cancer diagnosis and stuff. And uh, I've really tried to be as honest as I possibly can. And I'm just, the way I kind of look at it is, I'm not going to be here tomorrow, so why not just tell you my story?
Yeah.
And, it's, I definitely don't want to be like boo-hoo for sorry me, but it's definitely felt good to kind of get some of this stuff off my shoulders. And, I don't blame anybody for anything in my life. If anything, I still carry the blame. I carry the blame with a lot of the issues when it comes to my children and stuff. And that's just because I choose to. And I love my kids very much. I love all the people in my life, in my circle. You have all made a very impactful portion of my life, and I hope I'm just a fraction to all of you as the example you guys have been to me. And I am proud and eternally grateful to be a Philly. And that the person I am today is from the direct values and the teachings from my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters. And I'm just like everybody else. I just had a troublesome life and just trying to keep my feet on the ground and try to get each day like the rest of you. But just I don't want to see any of you just deal with the bull crap that I feel like like a lot of the stuff that I've talked about over these last handful of hours that don't take 45 years to let people know that certain things are very sensitive to you. Get help sooner than I did. Not that I didn't have help, but it's just I just chose to carry that darkness for such a long time, and we're all too beautiful of people to carry that, and to carry that and then to get a cancer diagnosis like the way I did, it was just like, but it's also allowed me to release, and I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but I know I don't have to live with that pain anymore, and I'm truly grateful for that. And it's been because of kind of this long conversation.
Yeah.
I love you all, and I hope to see you down the road for sure.
Well, Matt, your story is parts of it are hard to imagine. It's hard to put myself in your shoes and imagine going through that. But I don't look at it as a sad story. It sounds like a victory story.
It feels like a victory story.
So
long overdue victories, but
yeah.
I definitely feel like I don't look like one, but I do. I feel like a champion.
Yeah.
And that Saint Nietzsche I did, he damn near got me once or twice, but
Yeah.
my parents didn't raise no fool, so.
Awesome, Matt.
All right.